Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I brought some water with me because my voice is a little weak. That doesn't mean I'm about to break into tears, though sometimes it sounds like it, and there's nothing I can get more emotional about than talking about peanuts and the good they do in the world. So I apologize for my raspy voice. It's been a struggle for me to talk over the last few weeks, and I've just been to voice therapy and things like that, and I think it's kind of maybe God's joke on me to say, this guy can't do anything but talk, and I'm going to take away his voice. If Senator Boozman loses his voice, then this will be a terrible thing, because the two of us like to talk. It's an honor to be here. I came in from Charlotte. Our peanut butter company is in Fitzgerald, Georgia. Anyone here from Fitzgerald? They know about us, but Fitzgerald is a great town that took us in. I used to work, and Senator Boozman is here, by the way. If you wave his hand, he's an esteemed guest, and just looked over and saw him there. His office is in the Hart Senate office building, I think. It used to be 141 in the day. It's still down there. I worked for about 2 years as a grunt on the 7th floor of that building. I worked in for a senator from Louisiana, and that is how I had come home from living in Uganda, East Africa. I had left college and gone off to Uganda, and my wife and I were missionaries. And so then when I came home, I went to graduate school in Washington, D.C. area, and my dad, who was a farm boy from Arkansas, of all places, used to say, you know, I never heard anybody who was working for God in 1 minute and went straight to working for the devil the next, because when I got off the plane, I ended up with a job. I was a translator back in the days when I could talk. And I had spent some time learning a different language. It's called Lusoga. It's a Bantu-based language, so that was, I ended up being a Senate translator on a congressional delegation, and I landed a job after that with a senator from Louisiana. Unfortunately, Louisiana didn't have any peanuts, but I didn't know about peanuts at that time. Not that many, though, they have some. And so I just started working there post being in Uganda. So 10 years in Uganda, and then showing up and stumbling my way into the Hart Senate office building. They gave me business cards. And I started meeting with people about another thing that is of great interest to this crowd today. It is nutrition. We're sitting here at lunch, and the world needs to be fed. And part of that is because we might feel sorry for the world, but part of it is because the world is a safer place. If you look at the senator's portfolio, he is on the Committee on Nutrition, which is something we should all care about in ag, so that's probably why he's here, but also on armed forces. And if you think about ways to keep the world safe right now, we can send our military in, as we've seen in Afghanistan, and it is expensive in the form of lives. It's expensive in the form of just cash that we have to outlay to keep these operations going. Or we can send food. And we found out through food aid that it's a lot safer and smarter to make a difference. Now, that used to not be something that was of interest to the peanut world, because we weren't in on the dole. It was the wheat and the soy and the corn and all these other farmers. But then something happened about 10 years ago that changed the world. And so I want to talk about that today, and I want to tell you that the work you do as peanut farmers, people in the peanut industry, people who work all along that spectrum, because it takes us all, right, to make this peanut crop come out. Whether your hands are in the soil or your tractor is driving to the soil, or whether you're one of the many who supply that industry, you are changing the world. In fact, you are the epicenter of the future of food aid. And I want to suggest to you that the cutting edge, the front lines of food aid, of people dying today, is not the Navy SEALs. In fact, the Navy SEALs of food aid is the peanut. It is RUTF. It is the worst of the worst. If you want to stop a terrorist, you go in with the best of the best and you say, this works, and we're strategically going to strike, right? We're not messing around. We're going to go in and stop this. That is what RUTF is, and that is what I want to talk about today. So if I can work this thing, my voice, fortunately, is getting better from the beginning. Let's see which one of these clicks it for. Oh, let's go back. So a child dies, and this is, one of the things, I grew up in church, and one of the things I learned early in church, I was from a denomination called the Church of Christ, and one thing I figured out quickly was that it was sort of like, to be effective, the preacher would have 20 minutes of making you feel bad. And if he could get 20 minutes of making you feel bad in, he was like hitting a home run. And at the end, he would sort of ask you for stuff, you repent or whatever you need to do. And so then you get, and if you're going to be effective as a politician, you kind of have some of that too. And I found that quickly in the nutrition world, that a lot of people start with photos like this. And if I could spend 20 minutes of making you feel bad about your blessings, about what you have, that maybe by the end I could have a pass the hat and we'd squeeze some money out of people. But that's not the way you change the world, right? I can make you feel bad. And maybe we should feel kind of bad that we just ate an amazing meal and we are on this amazing beach. But we should also feel a sense of, wow, to whom much is given, maybe a lot is expected, right? And so that doesn't make us feel bad. That makes us feel blessed. That makes us feel fortunate. That makes us feel actually amazed that we were, through this great lottery of birth, born where we were born, in the families we were born into. I was born in Flint, Michigan, to a couple that grew up in Grubbs, Arkansas. And they left Grubbs because in those days, Senator, there wasn't many jobs in Arkansas. And now it's switched, by the way. Michigan, my hometown, has got people leaving to go to Arkansas. But they left when they were 18, got a job in the plant and all that stuff. And so our family essentially was this kind of, a farmer family growing up in the suburbs of Flint, Michigan. And we were poor, but we didn't know it. And we lived all those years. And now I look back, and when I went to Africa at age 23, I had this image of myself as, I'm the poor kid from Flint who drives a rusty Chevette. And we're the poor guys. And then I showed up and I was like, I'm the Bill Gates of my neighborhood. People in Uganda would come up to me and walk into my house, which is a little 800 square foot house with cement floors. And my friends from the US would visit and say, oh, you guys are really sacrificial, you're good people. And my friends from Uganda would be like, you live here? This is swanky. Just, you 4 of you live in this giant house, And so it just depends. I learned early on, it really depends on who you compare yourself to, right? If you want to feel good about yourself, then pick the right group to compare yourself to. And wealth is very relative as well. And so all of us in this room, we come from some hard places. And I think to go into a room full of peanut farmers and peanut in the industry and to say, you're the richest people I know, you want to roll your eyes and go, give me a break, buddy. I know some rich people and it ain't us, right? But we are blessed, right? We do have more than we need. And what I find is in crowds like this, where people are aware of that, they also are the most generous people. They're the people who may not have the most in our culture and in our society, but who say, I want to make a difference with what I've been blessed with. So the bad news is, I'll start with the bad news, is every 8 seconds a child dies from severe acute malnutrition. That's more than AIDS. That's more than TB. That's more than malaria. That's more than have died in Afghanistan. That's more than all of those combined times 2. That's a lot. It's the #1 killer of children under 6 in the world, not getting enough food. End of story. And for years and years, we haven't had anything we could do. If you mix up a bunch of corn and soy, which is the big food aid product, right? If you go to an ag meeting and you say, hey, I want to feed the world through the World Food Program, they're giving them stuff called CSB. You've probably heard of it. It's corn and soy blended, and then it's got a bunch of pluses on the end because they need those pluses because they add in something that's actually healthy, right? They put vitamins and then they put extra stuff in. But with peanuts, if you eat a handful of peanuts in the concoction that we've made, you've got it all in one shot. And they figured that out about 15 years ago. They were working with the worst of the worst. So this is like where the terror cells are. These are places like South Sudan, where kids are dying in droves, places like Somalia, places like Yemen today. That the loss of life through simple lack of access to food is many, many times that of any kind of kinetic engagement through military or terror. And we can save lives. And so they figured out, if we take this peanut butter stuff, essentially it's like the inside of a Reese's peanut butter cup, crammed into a packet about the size of your iPhone. It looks like this right here. And if you can treat them 6 weeks, 94% of the kids are better. Now, they did clinical trials on the COVID vaccines, and we have a lot of opinion about, Johnson & Johnson and all these other things. But when they looked at them and they said, these things are amazingly effective. You know what, they are 94% effective if you're a vaccine fan. Well, this stuff right here, this little packet of peanut butter, is 94% effective. So much so that when the experts from UC Davis and from all of these nutrition Tufts and other places where there's expertise, Washington University and St. Louis, they came back with clinical results from the trials, and everybody said that can't be right. Because in our previous trials, for the past 50 years, half of these kids die. And you're telling me if you mix up peanut butter and put a little stuff in it and hand it to them, that 94% of them go away and they don't get sick again, they're good to go. They can go on and get a good life if you give them this stuff. And the answer to that is yes. In fact, there was so much skepticism that they've now run repeated clinical trials, and this stuff is called, you see the thing in the middle, RUTF. And so I was telling you a little bit about my story. I showed up from Uganda, start working in the Senate, of a miracle to that to happen. And as the senator can tell you about his staff, there's a big staff, and some of these people have jobs that they go in there and they wake up, they get in there at 6, and they don't go to work until about 8, and we complain about our politicians, but let me tell you, they're staffed by a bunch of underpaid people in Washington who work like crazy. Well, I wasn't really one of them. I was underpaid, but I was really working like crazy because my job was Africa. And nobody walks in and pounds their hand on the desk of a senator and says, darn it, tell me what we're going to do today about Africa. They don't do that. They say, why are we spending money over there? Why are we doing all this? So, my boss or nobody's boss is really like deeply pressured by these starving kids who are dying. Nobody's demanding that. Nobody's angry about it. Nobody's saying it'll cost a pittance. It'll cost less than 1% of our overall budget to go in and just solve this, make it go away, and we won't even have to talk about it. Nobody ever says that. And so I was a legislative fellow. I had 2 years, but people weren't beating my doors down, so I would go around and have meetings, and UNICEF came into our office and said, you need to get into this stuff. And I had never heard of it. This was 12 years ago right now, and I thought, well, if that's true, then somebody ought to do this. And so then I spent my 2 years collecting business cards, and if you work in the Hart office building, you get a lot of business cards, and a lot of people come see you, and they all want to see the senator, but they can't all see the senator, so some of them have to see guys like me. And you want to tell them, I can't do much for you, it's pretty bad that you ended up with me after coming all the way to Washington. Well, I caught all of the UNICEF and all of the people coming in to say, give me more money, because I was going to say, listen, these people on the approach committee aren't sitting around talking about giving more money to you. They're talking about taking it away. And yet, I thought, as I heard this pitch about peanut butter and how just a little peanut butter could save somebody, I thought somebody needs to go to the Georgia people and tell them this. And I marched over to Johnny Isakson's office, met with his staffer, Chris Sullivan, who's a good friend of mine, he's still in Washington, and told him, and guess what he said? I already knew this. Just like you're thinking you're having a new idea. I heard this like 5 years ago, right? We've been talking about this at Georgia forever. It's just not happening, right? We can't appropriate money for something that doesn't exist. The only company in the world that makes this is a French company, and they're a for-profit company, and that was right at the time in the Senate, by the way, that we didn't have French fries, we had Liberty fries, or Freedom fries, right? We're not big fans of funding the French, right? So I thought, me and my good idea, it's not going to work. And I started talking to Chris, and then I came to an American Peanut Council meeting. And first off, they told me, you should go to the American Peanut Council meeting. And my response was, there's an American Peanut Council? Really? And I went, and I met Stephanie Grunenfelder. I think I might have met Don. I know I met, the Birdsongs were there. Just some people in this room I may have met that very first day. And it got me excited because I thought, you know what, if we could get a few of these people excited about this could happen. And so then I rented a car, wandered around, ended up in Fitzgerald. We built a plant, I'm trying to go fast. We built a plant 10 years ago, and since then we've been making millions and millions of these packets. Right now we make several million of them a week. They look sort of like this right here. And 3 million kids have been saved by the efforts of the peanut. These are twins that we ran in the clinical trial. On the top, Clarice. On the bottom, Dominique. That's the same kid left and right. So that's Clarice, and then she gained, 4 or 5 pounds just from eating these peanut butter packets. This is her twin brother, Dominique, on the bottom. I was fortunate to go back this past year, right before COVID, and now they're little thriving 13, 14-year-old kids. It's amazing to see kids that have been impacted by this. This is our plant in Fitzgerald. We have since built on to the right. That right there, as you see it, is 30,000 square feet. We built another 70,000 on the right, which is a big warehouse. And then we just built a roaster on the left, which is another 25,000. And we're in the midst of a big expansion right now to ramp up our packet production. Here's some of our people. We got some of the greatest people in the world working for us, and about 60 of us, just making lots of peanut butter, and it's stacking up and shipping out faster than ever. I was looking last week out of the port of Savannah. In about a 10-day period, we shipped 57 containers full, just going out, just flying out. And we're trying now to move and warehouse. If we have any friends here in Savannah, I need to buy a warehouse in Savannah. And Manna, by the way, is a nonprofit. So we look like a company, we act like a company, we work like a company, we look for margins, very small margins like a company, but I don't own it. It is started by, it's held as a nonprofit. If you want to know anything about us, you can click on our 990, you can see what everybody makes, you can see exactly what it costs to make a packet. And we're the only ones in the world who operate like that, with transparency. And so the price of a box of this stuff, you see those boxes behind there? Each box feeds a kid. And we're making millions of these boxes each year. And when we started, a box was $58 a box. Today, they sell for $38 a box. So think of how many more kids are being fed through that. And so my push to you and my encouragement to you is not to make you feel bad, but to make you feel good and to make you think, wow, how did some of you already knew this, but some of you who thought, how did I not know this? That the peanut is not just a way, it is the Navy SEALs of food aid. That is the best analogy I can think of because it's small, it's strategic. If you compare it to the big Navy, they've got boats in the World Food Program, they've got ships over there with CSB++, they've got tons of stuff moving. But here in our little peanut world, we're the strategic strike force team that's going in right now to kids who will die if they don't get it. If you are severely, acutely malnourished, you have a week. You're not hungry, you have ceased to be hungry because of the deficiencies that you face. And if you think about that as an analogy for our lives, think about failing to be hungry, ceasing to be hungry. When you cease to be hungry in your job, you're dying, right? When you cease to be hungry in your sports team, right? So many of us are coaches, we love to get there with the team, say, guys, you gotta want this, right? When you cease to be hungry, you're dying, you're losing. When that marriage slips to where there's not that hunger there, then sadly, it's dying. We know that about ourselves. We know that about humans. And it's true of these little kids. The hunger push that we have inside of us is a gift from God. It's like a gas gauge that says you need to eat. You need fuel. And it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. We don't need to end hunger. We need to end people who don't have access to food, right? Hunger in that way is our friend. But these kids who are under 6, who are lacking the proper nutrition, have ceased to be hungry. And we have a chance to save them. They don't need something else. They need peanuts. They don't need the whole world to stop and do something. They just need us to get in and to say, here's a little peanut butter with vitamins, and we can save you. George Washington Carver was that kind of person. He was a scrappy kid who, when he was little, was severely, acutely malnourished. That's why he was so short. He was only 5'2", and his brother was about 6'1". And when George, many of you may know this about him, but he grew up in Diamond, Missouri, just across from the Arkansas border, and some raiders came in at the end of the Civil War, raided his family farm. He was being raised by a German family, the Carvers. Moses Carver was his adopted father, and Missouri was a free state, so no one there was enslaved, but his mother, Mary, was part of this family, and this raiding group that came in took Mary and left. They came in the middle of the night, they stole some horses and some other stuff, and Moses Carver in the morning went down to his neighbor and said, I want you to chase them down, and I want you to bring back the girl, Mary, and they took her baby too. So he paid him a racehorse, actually. So the guy goes off, rides down, he had been in the war and he was a cavalry type guy. He goes down looking for this raiding team, and then the story is that he comes back riding across into the Carver farm about 2 weeks later, and as he rides in, it's evident Mary is not with him. And so they're standing there looking, and the guy gets off his horse and he tells them, I didn't find the girl. But then he opens up his saddlebag, and he reaches in his saddlebag, He said, but I found the baby. And he hands him this little emaciated, severely, acutely malnourished child that was about to die, and they nursed that kid back to health, and that kid was George Washington Carver. He never grew to his full height because he was severely, acutely malnourished, which happens to these kids. They're short. You'll see that in their life. But George was brilliant. He learned German from that family. He learned music from that family. He went on to get his PhD, to be in Iowa. And after that, he got a letter from Booker T. Washington that said, you should come to Tuskegee. I won't promise you any pay, but you should come down here because our people need you. And he went, and he changed the world with the peanut, right? He's one of the big reasons that all of us can say we rotate in peanuts and grow peanuts in our life. So there's a guy who's changing the world with peanuts, and today's G.W. Carvers look like this. They either look like the fellow on the left, that's a Haitian peanut farmer, or this may be one of you. I picked it, this is a Google image, so you probably tell me who that is right there. And my question is, if you need a lot of peanuts, who are you going to call? Right? Just from a practical sense. I mean, I respect both of those men right there and the women that support them or that do the work. But if I want a lot of peanuts, I'm thinking I'm going to call the guy on the right? If I want to stop a terror group, I'm thinking I'll call it the Navy SEALs. And we are the ones who can do this. We will produce with our acreage, with our ability to pump out more peanuts. And not that we're trying to, we want as many people as possible, and many of you in this room are all about producing this all over the world. But guess what? When the World Food Program needs this, they need a lot fast. And all of you are facing the issues of aflatoxin and 100 other things that come with peanuts, and we're trying to solve that. But in the meantime, the U.S. peanut is going to be the thing that does it. Last thing I'll tell you, I just flew in here. I haven't been flying much. I don't know if you have, but when I flew 2 weeks ago, I got on and they put me in an exit row. And for me as a nonprofit guy, that's kind of my version of first class because I have extra feet. I'm not going to get any first class tickets, but exit row, I'm like, yes, I'm in exit row. So I get to the exit row, and when you get in the exit row, what is it that the flight attendant says to you? We all know this speech, right? We've heard it. They come up and they say, you are seated in an exit row. And then they say, I need verbal and visual confirmation that, what's the speech that the FAA gives them? In the event of an emergency, you are willing and able to help your fellow passengers. And they asked me that, and I looked at the guy next to me and I thought, that's like an existential question. It's a big question. What they're really saying, and I don't want to scare you, is this. If this plane is on fire, if this plane hits the ocean and water is rushing in, you're the closest to the door. And here's the question. Are you willing and able to help your fellow passengers? And the answer is, we're all able. But the willing part, I don't know about that. I don't know anyone on this plane. My family ain't on this plane, right? And I'm thinking that as soon as that door's open, I'm probably going to be out it. And I don't know what happens with the rest. Well, we are hurling through space on this ball called Earth. And the question is this, in the event of an emergency, are you willing and able to help your fellow passengers? And then you think, well, are you trying to make me feel bad? Is this one of those speeches? And my question is, well, what constitutes an emergency? Is it a child dying every 8 seconds? I'm thinking of all the emergencies we can muster up. That might qualify, that might be one of them. And for those of us who are able, the question then comes if we are willing. And what I've seen over and over again, in the peanut industry is that people are willing and able. I have finished speaking at times like this and had farmers come up to me and say, I'm giving you a load of peanuts. I've had people come to me, John Powell come to me and say, we're going to do this next year. I've had Tyrone Spear, and I could just keep naming the people. I've had Birdsong and others come to support us. And some of you are in this room. And so I know there are many people here who are able and willing. And I want to thank you for that. And I wanted to encourage you to say that whether you know it or not, thanks to our appropriations, by the way, the United States government has changed and we are now buying, we're for sure the biggest government in the world engaged in this stuff, in peanuts. So it's still not that big. We're still a little blip compared to other stuff, but we're big and we're getting bigger. And that's thanks to the political will and to the interest of people in this room. So I wanted to thank you for this opportunity. I wanted to encourage you to check out MANA, check out RUTF, and text us, write us, check out our Instagram, other things like that, and find out ways that you could be both willing and able to help out with this cause. Thank you.